Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. Apparently I lied in my first video when I said I'm only going to go over good books and good runs of books, because what I have in front of me today is a two-issue miniseries from 1992 called The Thing from Another World. Now, I went to my collection originally and just pulled out a bunch of stuff that I remembered as being great, and I thought that's what I was going to use for my first couple of videos. And I remember this as being great, but I remembered a little wrong. It's not great. It's good. It's not great. If you're a fan of John Carpenter's The Thing, you'll like it, most probably. So, since there's that audience that will possibly think that this is a great book, I'm going to go over that anyways, but I want to go over it for another reason too, because it's a really good example of the connection between story and art. And I want to go over that because it really has a lot to do with what's going on today in comics. So, to start off, really quickly, I give you a very quick backstory for Dark Horse Comics. Dark Horse Comics was a publisher in 1980s, 1990s. The first publisher that I can remember as having comic books consistently on the shelf next to Marvel and DC. They did a lot of different kind of things, a lot of indie books, that looked indie books, but they also had a lot of licenses that they used for their comics. They had RoboCop, they had Terminator, they had Indiana Jones, they also had The Thing. So, if you clicked on this video, you probably know what John Carpenter's The Thing is. But again, for anybody who doesn't know, I'll go over it really quickly. The basic plot of the movie, it's a movie that came out in 1982. Was that a spaceship crashed in Antarctica, probably, I think they said in the movie, is like 10,000 years ago, and the alien froze and just went into hibernation. And then in 1982, which was the then present, a bunch of scientists uncovered this alien, and this alien was a thing that would consume and take over other life forms. It would replicate them, copy them, make another copy of them that would look the same as they used to be, but inside they would be this thing. It's a very short description of what it was, but this is one of the best sci-fi horror, not really horror even, it's more suspense horror movies of the 1980s. It's a great movie, and it feeds into this comic, this two-issue miniseries, because this comic picks up right at the end of that movie. It picks up with the characters of MacReady and Childs. And so that's why I say, if you're a fan of that movie, the original, not the 2011 one that came out, but the original 1982 one, this is a continuation of that story. And it's a good continuation of that story. And it works sort of well. It has limitations just because there's a change in medium. And one of the things that really makes the movie great is the fact that it is a very good example of a man versus nature story. Not because the thing is something other than human, but the thing is more of a representation of the unknown. It is very much unknown in its quality throughout the movie. It hides everywhere. It likes to hide in the dark. It can hide in the snow. It can hide inside a person without them even knowing it. It can hide in plain view as another person, and you would never know. That's the whole nature of this thing in the movie. It likes to quietly take over by hiding, either out of sight or in plain sight. And that comes off in the movie. John Carpenter plays that for all it's worth in the movie, and he does a beautiful job of it, because he uses things like light and shadow very good. He has the very, very bright daytime in the snow contrast to the almost pitch black nighttime scenes where you can barely see anything. There's a lot of use of smoke and steam and things like that. The character's breath as it crystallizes in the air, when it's really cold, because this is set in Antarctica. There's a really good example of that. It's the last scene of the entire movie, where there's two characters, Giles and MacReady, and Giles is speaking, and you can sort of see his breath as it comes out when he's speaking, but MacReady's face is almost completely obscured by his own breath as it comes out, and you can barely see his face sometimes when he's speaking. These are the things he uses in the movie to hide things. and it works really well. And that's one of the things that they're trying to transfer over onto the page for this comic. And it works to some degree, and it works because of the way that the art is done for this book. Now, to switch over to comics just for a minute, I want to talk about the fact that most people today, or a lot of people today, certainly a lot of people that I know, talk about the fact that especially the coloring in modern books, modern comic books, the colorers and the way that they put in the color, it just doesn't work like it used to. It's too dark, it's just too much. And I agree with that. But before I want to talk about why it doesn't work, I want to talk about some of the instances where it does work. And this is one of the books, a very early book, where it does work. Now, if you had picked up this book in 1992 when it originally came out on the shelf, it stuck out like a sore thumb. You wouldn't bat an eye at it today because of the way that it's made, but it stuck out in 1992 because it has a cardstock cover, it has glossy paper, it has more colors than you could shake a stick at, and this did not look like anything else on the shelf. Very few other books looked like this. So this looked very much like a modern book, very much like a book you would find on the shelves today. And the coloring system, where it doesn't work in a lot of books today, it does work in this book. Now, I should go over very quickly, I suppose, where this book doesn't work. I don't think it works in a lot of ways because of the suspense horror. That's a transfer sometimes between two mediums. It's the fact that this artist uses a lot of splash pages, and he's only got 2 books in order to tell the story. You can't put a whole lot of suspense into your art when you're doing that. It's very difficult to do. He does it well with the coloring, but with the short number of pages that he had, it was really hard to do otherwise. It all is generated from the fact that it's supposed to be a suspense, whereas I think they're using this book more as a horror book. But you have the suspense of you don't know who the thing is. It could be MacReady, it could be Giles. You don't know, and the fact that it has to have that suspense in it. There's no thought bubbles. You can't see people's thoughts because then that would give it away. And so there's a lot of ham-handed exposition on the part of MacReady just talking to himself in a room by himself. And that doesn't work. It falls down that way. And I think the biggest problem with this book is they try to take the story and put it in more than one location. They're constantly moving, and this type of suspense works best in a very small location, like in the movie. It doesn't have to be the same location as the movie, but to keep on moving from location to location, I think really is what shot this book in the foot. But to get back to the art and where it does work, you're looking at the art now, and it's almost like it's a artistic hide and seek with these colors and this art. And it works because, well, the thing in this comic, which is what the book is centered around, well, this thing likes to hide. And you're looking at the art in the book and you're thinking, is that a tentacle for the thing, or is that a cord coming from the radio? You're asking, is that a body in the snow, or is that the thing? You can't really tell. There's a lot of instances where you can't tell what's going on, and for normal comic books, that doesn't work. But for this, where it's a horror, where it's a suspense, where you're trying to hide things, where the entire story is hinged upon hidden things, that's where it does work. So one of the problems is that very few books actually have that incorporated into their story. So when you have that incorporated into your story, when you have those hidden things incorporated into your story, this type of art, this type of coloring works well. But comic books, especially American comic books, that's not what their main focus is. DC had a little bit of a similar thing going on, which they used in a couple of miniseries. I can think off the top of my head, like the Books of Magic or Black Orchid. And again, these are books that were mystical based, so you have a hidden element in them, and it did work for them. They had other books where it didn't work, really didn't work, like Tempest Fugitive, where it's all about time travel. To be fair, though, if I remember correctly from reading the interview with the artist on the back page of that book, he said his favorite color was aquamarine, so that might have been the entire problem right there. But Marvel really didn't have a whole lot of success with this, and it's because, again, the stories that where it does work, it has a hidden element and you're trying to hide things. Whereas most comic books, you need to have things plainly done. You're not trying to hide things. And so the reason why it doesn't work today, I'd say one of the fundamental reasons why it doesn't work in books today, this kind of coloring and this kind of art, which is everywhere in comics today, is because right off the bat, your story and your art don't complement each other. They're working at cross purposes. One's trying to be really clear and the other is muddying the waters of your story. That's why it doesn't work. But I want to go over the nuts and bolts of why it doesn't work in another video, because I think that's a really important thing to try to make comics better, is that your story and your art just can't work against each other. And that's something that's happening all the time in comics today. But to get back to this book, if you're a fan of John Carpenter's The Thing, you'll probably like this book just because it's a continuation of the story. You get to see what happens to MacReady, you get to see what happens to Childs, because both of them survive, and so does The Thing. And you're just trying to follow, again, a little more with the story. It's just another chapter added on to the end. Also, if you do like it, because I know there'll be people out there who would read it and think, well, compared to the movie, it's nothing. It's not any good at all. But for a real fan, you take it for what it's worth. And there's also another miniseries after this one that is a continuation of the story again from this book. You can take this book for the two books that it is, the miniseries for the 2 books that it is, and just leave it at that. Well, there's another miniseries that continues it on after that. It's an entirely different beast because it has different art and a lot of different things going for it. So yeah, that is The Thing from Another World from Dark Horse Comics, 1992. If you're a fan of John Carpenter's The Thing, I'd say go pick it up if you haven't read it before. And when I was thinking about this book, thinking about the art, thinking about all of this stuff, I was kind of glad that I decided to do this video and to talk about The Thing, because it's actually kind of appropriate for the state of comic books today. Because in this story, you have this alien thing which is trying to take over. It's hiding and trying to take over. It's trying to change things underneath. It's trying to make you into something that is a copy of what you are, but inhuman. And I think that's a really good analogy for what's going on in the comic book industry today, because you have people trying to take it over, change it into something that it's not, something that's not quite human. And when I say that, you can see it in the pages of some of the books. These stories have characters that just don't act in a human way. And even as fans, we can see that happening and going on. I don't know what it would be like to be a comic book artist in that kind of structure, or any kind of comic book pro, and to be working in that. That must be a horrible experience to have. Again, just as a comparison to this book, these things which are trying to take over and trying to change the way that you think, trying to change the way that you actually are, trying to change the fundamentals of who you are, and ready to attack you if you don't change. That must be really tough for comic book artists who want just to have good comics. And it would be really easy to give in to that. And I'm glad there are comic book artists and professionals out there who are helping fans to bring comics hopefully back to what they are supposed to be. So, on that cheery note, I am going to talk about more about the art and the story and how they connect with each other in the next video. I think it's a really important thing to get comics back on track, to have the art and the stories both come together. Unfortunately, it's going to be the more negative of the two videos, if you can believe that. So if you like this video, hit like, hit subscribe, let me know you're out there, let me know there's someone still human out there. I will see you in the next video, and I think today I am going to leave the last word to McCready.
I'm gonna hide this tape when I'm finished. If none of us make it, at least there'll be some kind of record. The storm's been hitting us hard now for 48 hours. We still have nothing to go on. Nobody trusts anybody now. We're all very tired. There's nothing else I can do. Just wait. R.J. McCready, helicopter pilot, U.S. Outpost North 31.